Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rick Porth, and I serve as chair of this Governance and Nominations Committee. I want to start by thanking everyone for joining us for this meeting. And a number of people in this meeting also put a lot of work into the things that we'll discuss over the next hour or so. So thank you for that. I'm going to call to order the Governance and Nominations Committee meeting for September 2nd, 2026. The time is now 10 o'clock, and we'll start with the roll call. I'd ask Felicia Brown to do the roll call for us.
Chair Porth,
Present.
Regent Bloom,
Present.
thank you. Regent James
Present.
and Regent Williams.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Felicia. Let's move to the second item on the agenda, which is the adoption of the agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the committee meeting agenda for today as presented? Anyone make a motion for me, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Great, thank you. Great. All those, any discussion on that? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Next is the approval of the minutes, the meeting minutes for our previous Governance and Nomination Committee meeting, which took place on June 8th, 2026. Can I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes for that meeting, please?
So moved.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thanks, Juanita. Any discussion on this? All right. Well, all those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. The first order of business on today's agenda is a topic that we've discussed before. It's a really important topic as it relates to our training requirements and orientation requirements set out in Public Act 22-16. And I'm going to call on Cameron Liston to walk us through a proposed training policy and to give us a little context and background on this topic. Cameron?
Thank you. Good morning, Regents. And just want to start off by saying I appreciate your leadership and collaboration on this policy. Really what it does is accomplish two really important things for us. First and foremost, it publicly recognizes the importance of a well-informed governance body for the system. It also establishes how we will achieve that mission here. And then secondly, but also important, brings us into compliance with Public Act 22-16, which requires us to have a policy on this topic. As you'll look through the policy, you'll note it's a fairly basic policy, not a lot, because really the work here will be in the next part of this when we talk about what this looks like substantively. But what this does is establish the training requirements from Public Act 22-16 as a board requirement. It also establishes the expectation for timely completion over a period of 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months, depending on the topics. And then it also establishes ongoing education and compliance monitoring for the boards to ensure that we're delivering this training, we're tracking that it's being completed, and we're ensuring that it's being completed. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Felicia also, I believe, is going to present on the substance behind this, which is really where the work has occurred. But I'm happy to answer questions at this time.
Any questions from members of the committee? I want to reemphasize what Cameron said. The training, this proposal for the training policy and the actual training that Felicia and Danny will talk about correspond exactly to the requirements in Public Act 22-16. It's our intention to comply in every respect to that requirement and to cover other topics as necessary in order for us to achieve good governance on behalf of the system. Are there any questions or comments or thoughts on this? Okay, good. In that case,
Regent Porth,
yes, Ira.
I'm trying, I didn't get my hand up fast enough. I do have some comments.
Sure.
We're talking about the resolution, correct?
Yes.
That's on the agenda. I think there is, this is both a resolution about orientation and compliance for new BOR members. It seems to be very heavy on the compliance and very light on the orientation. We don't talk about an introduction where there is, what is CSCU, what are its components, how many students do we have, what are the, we have a North Star of student success. That doesn't come through anywhere here. I think the orientation has to be, my assumption is that most of the people coming on the board are not coming from a higher education background. They're coming from a background in other fields. And I think, some of the issues that we have, accreditation of programs, new programs, et cetera, are important to the incoming board members to get an understanding of early on. And I don't see the emphasis on that here. This is very high on the guardrails, the compliance, which is obviously very important, but it seems to be weak on the orientation part of it.
Thanks, Ira. Thanks for your input on that. I think maybe the best way to respond to you is to ask Felicia and or Danny to present just a few slides on the content of the training and how it will be delivered. I think your points are well taken. I think that we need to pay attention to what you're saying. And my thought is that we'll roll this out in a way that we can be, I hope, nimble and responsive to revising the strategy and the content as necessary in the coming weeks and months. But if it's okay with you, Ira, I'm going to call on Felicia and Danny to present these few slides to talk a little bit more about what you're addressing. Felicia, Danny.
Okay, I'll walk us through the slides, and I think some of Regent Bloom's questions might be answered when we get to the particular area that looks at content. As Cameron indicated, the training, both orientation and then ongoing training, is intended to conform to Public Act 22-16. It's been developed with that in mind and its implications. In addition to in-person orientation, training and ongoing development will be supported by online training. So this ensures that the training that all the regions receive is both consistent, there are clear expectations around governance, their fiduciary responsibilities, and compliance. And it also is trackable in terms of the continuing education. And I think the continuing education will cover topics that might speak to Regent Bloom's concerns. So again, the training is intended to start with an in-person orientation presented by subject experts within the administration. The three areas that you see here: governance and fiduciary responsibilities, ethics and compliance, finance, and then board operations and communication. So these are intended to be in person because it will allow for both an exchange of information and then clarification regarding these topical areas. The ongoing training will be through a platform that is called NeoGov. I'll talk about NeoGov sort of practically what happens. Regions will receive a notification. A time frame will be identified for the content that you need to complete. So the format is intended to be modules that are presented 5 to 10 minutes per module. And again, these are content or core areas within the system's functional areas that will be presented by the subject experts within the administration. The modules will also be available for later viewing. The expectation is that they will be presented over a 30 to 120 day period. And again, they will be assigned with automated reminders, and then there will be tracking. Modules will be available as refreshers and then also for continuing education. I just want to reiterate, this is a blended approach. The training schedule that's being presented here is in person for approximately 4.5 hours. You will see again these specific areas around governance, ethics, compliance and accountability, financial stewardship, board operations, and then there will be information presented regarding continuing education and resources. These modules that are presented in person, I just want to highlight once again, we believe that these were the core areas around which regents would need primary training, especially as it relates to meeting their governance responsibilities. The online modules and refreshers are content specific. And so, Regent Bloom, I just want to also highlight, so academic affairs would be one of those core areas. And I believe both academic affairs and probably information that might come from institutional advancement as it relates to the system in terms of its historical context and also the kind of detailed information that you are speaking of might be captured within these online modules as well, if that makes sense. So what we're proposing for your consideration today is the modules, both in person and online, that have been displayed and included in the PowerPoint that you received. Following the meeting, we'll continue to have conversations internally to finalize the training, the content, and move to a date for which orientation would be provided. And then we would work for the creation and development and presentation for the online content.
Felicia,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand
No,
from the
that's
phone.
fine, Regent.
I'm not sure you fully answered Regent Bloom's question in terms of emphasis.
Mhm.
You certainly, explained, how it's intended in terms of the blended model. I have a different question, which is, I think 4.5 hours is a very long time to ask people to sit for an orientation at one time.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to understand a little bit more about the level of detail you were thinking is necessary for regents to comply with this, because it seems to me that's a discussion we need to have. What level of detail do regents need to be educated on with respect to particularly the statutes and the policies? Because we're responsible for oversight and governance, and we are responsible for knowing what they are. But I'm curious as to a little bit more context on the level of detail, because I think sometimes we get too involved in too much detail that should really be management and the administration's responsibilities and not the region's responsibility.
So let me respond regarding the element of time and the presentation of information. So Region Porthos was the only region who participated in the May 13th orientation. And actually, we had scheduled orientation for roughly about this amount of time and found that it really was insufficient. What is being presented today is slightly different from what was presented in May. I would say from a governance standpoint, I do believe that a clear understanding for the board for what their governance and fiduciary responsibilities is very critical. I think also the ethics and compliance piece is pretty critical as well. Because of your responsibilities as it relates to financial matters, financial stewardship is important. So the items that are being proposed are areas that we believe are probably most critical for your governance responsibilities. And
And-
so this information and its presentation in an in-person format is to allow, one, for the exchange of information, but also for there to be clarification should you have questions that arise. And so during the May 13th exchange, I would say there were a number of questions that did come up and exchange of information. Regent Porth can speak to this if he would like to as well. But this is how these areas were specifically identified. We wanted to have sufficient opportunity for there to be an exchange, not just simply information presented in person, but for you all to also be able to have some clarification if there are questions that you have around these topical areas too.
I do have a couple comments. Thanks, Felicia. I think that's a good description of how we got to this. I think that both Ira and Juanita's feedback is important and something we should pay attention to. It's true that the May 13th orientation that we had, it went for about 4 hours. And part of my response to both of your questions would be that a lot of this was designed, to be honest, first and foremost, to be in compliance with the state statute on our training and orientation, and to make sure that elected officials and other leaders in the state government could see that and understood that. But I've always thought about this training, and we've been at this for more than a year now, including that May 13th session that we had. I've always thought that we should stay flexible in this, not only in terms of content, but in terms of delivery. There are some new ideas that are being proposed today, which I appreciate and think may work better. For example, the idea is to start with that in-person session, and maybe the amount of time is too long, but then to augment that, not with in-person sessions, but with online modules in chunks that people can handle and move through on their own asynchronously. That part of what's being proposed today, I think, is trying to be responsive to the kinds of issues both Ira and Juanita raised. We should talk more about this right now, because now's our chance. Hopefully we'll reach some agreement and be able to propose it to the full board. But I think if more tweaking, more revision needs to be done to either content or method of delivery, I think we should enter into this whole process with that idea in mind. and be as nimble as we can. My goal, I think our goal should be just to put this in front of our fellow regents and to make it as easy as possible for them to participate and to complete this and to finish. This is another item on our agenda, with some sort of commitment, formal or informal, to using what they learn in these sessions. Is Ira, Juanita, is that responsive to your concerns, or do we need to discuss this more?
Okay, I am almost visibly online, but Rick, I absolutely agree with the intention and also with everything that you said. And I like the fact that there is the online component, which is good because it's from in terms of digging in a little bit deeper and getting better understanding. That's fine. The issue I have, and I think it's not just with this, but it's in general, I believe that the staff could do a better job in terms of, hold on, I I don't want you to hear me twice. I think when we get materials, even for ASA, and we ask for presentations, I think, frankly, the systems can be more concise and effective in terms of their delivery. I find that um, being able to synthesize and get to the heart of the matter in a more concise way, rather, is something that we need to work on in terms of all of our meetings. There is a tendency to go into to go into a lot of detail, a lot of explanation, as opposed to really looking at it from the standpoint of what is it that the regents need to know, why do we need to know, what actions do we need to take, and I think a little more forethought in the planning of these presentations would be in order, and then I think the discussion would be more meaningful, and I just feel that uh, time management is not something that we're particularly good at. And I get the, let's try to schedule it for 4, but to put that in the resolution, that the specificity of how long each one of these sessions is, I think that binds us in a way that's not appropriate. So yes, in part, you've answered the question, but no, you haven't completely. And I don't know what Ira, I'm sure has more to add to this.
Thanks, Juanita. Ira?
I agree with Juanita. I mean, if we go back to ancient times and think about 4.5-hour classes we may have had in at the university or in professional school, nobody is focused at the end of their 4.5-hour class, particularly on complex issues. I think Juanita is absolutely right about. I think this could be much more focused. I'm also bothered in the resolution. There's only one mention of students. I mean, what is the product of this enterprise? It's the students, and have in the fourth clause we have one mention relating to student debt. What motivates people to sit on the Board of Regents? It's not thinking about student debt that is going to motivate people to to serve. I think there has to be more. Why is this important?
Okay, thanks, Ira. Other comments or thoughts on this?
Regent Porth?
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with the comments that Ira and Juanita have made. And at the same time, I want to thank staff for putting together what they did. Regent Porth, earlier you mentioned that a lot of this has to do with the state statute that has a long list of things that we're supposed to cover. And so we need to do that. And I think that the strategy of having some of these nuts and bolts requirements that are very important be delivered online and easily accessible for folks to take care of in that way makes a whole lot of sense. At the same time, Regent Bloom at the outset talked about, and I'll just try and distill it. You know, why are we doing this? What's our core mission? And we have online the CSCU mission, vision, and goals. And I think right at the outset, new members of the Board of Regents and all of us periodically going back to refresh. It would be good to be in touch with the mission of CSCU, the vision, the goals, and our responsibilities and powers and authority, because that so often is an issue with the board, and yet we don't spend a lot of time going back to the state statute and the practice thereafter, and review that. I mean, I'm looking at our mission, vision, and goal statements that are online. They're not bad. And the goals, back to Ira's point a second ago, student success is the #1 goal. So that's students right at the top of that. Innovation and economic growth, #2. Affordability, sustainability, #3. And goal #4 is systemness. We got to get a better word for that. But basically, it's about realizing the potential of the CSCU system. And my suggestion would be we say something like that instead of systemness. But having our board members be acclimated into that overall big picture of the purpose, mission, and goals of our higher education system, that would be the best way to start it off, kick it off. It reminds us why we're on this board and what our whole purpose is.
Yep. That's helpful. Thank you, Don. Look, all of this feedback is really good and really important, and I'll take responsibility. I'm the one that asked that we focus on this compliance with 2216. But and to be honest, maybe this won't be possible. I still hope we can take a vote today after we make a few modifications based on this feedback, so that we can keep this moving forward. And I say that because I also believe, as I said before, that we should be nimble in this throughout, and be prepared to modify this as we go along, and new things come up, or new ways of providing the information become available. So I wonder. I'm thinking out loud here, and I invite all of you to jump in on this.
Rick Cameron has had his hand up for a while. I
Oh,
don't know.
geez, I'm sorry, Cameron. Go ahead, and I'll finish my thoughts. Go ahead, Cameron.
Thanks, sir. This may be helpful for where you're heading as well. I just wanted to highlight that the board resolution and the policy itself do not prescribe the detail that you saw in the presentation. The presentation is supporting materials to show how this could look. The policy itself does not, have the 4.5 hours. The resolution doesn't as well. The policy itself is really covering it is 15 topics out of the statute. So it is a lot of substance that must be covered. But you also notice number 15 is and other matters determined by the board to be relevant to it. So the presentation by Felicia and Danny really is supplemental materials. It is not what is up for consideration today. The policy itself is designed to allow for that flexibility, that feedback in terms of what the actual agendas look like, what topics are covered as we continue to develop these. This is going to be the first set that we're pushing out, and partially responsive to Regent Bloom. The student success is actually 3 sub-modules that has been created by our student success folks. Academic affairs is another 2. So there is a lot of discussion about our students in the already planned on-demand modules, but certainly the in-person portion topics there can be adjusted even post-adoption of the policy.
Right. So thanks, Cameron. So my suggestion, and again, push back if you don't agree, is based on what Cameron just said and the actual language in the resolution. I would still recommend that we act on this today, but that we, among ourselves, have the opportunity to to communicate with staff leaders in this meeting modifications to the delivery strategy. And so, for example, a few of you have talked about the need to emphasize right from at the beginning of any orientation or training, mission, vision, goals, our North Star commitments. We could modify the first meeting, the in-person orientation to start with that. And then on Juanita's point, to try to condense the rest of the agenda for the in-person meeting in a way that would allow us to do this. And this might still not be satisfactory, Juanita, but say 3 hours or 3.5 hours or something like that. That would be one suggestion. Could we approve this policy, which doesn't spell out content? I shouldn't say that, which doesn't spell out delivery strategies, but does talk about the requirements in 2216. Could we approve that for submission to the full board and agree among ourselves that we'll continue in the coming weeks to provide feedback, not only on the first session in terms of length and content, but also on the modules, which that's a new concept, by the way, everyone. And I wasn't thinking that way. Again, we've been at this for a year and a half. I think the idea of a shorter in-person startup and the modules being delivered asynchronously with, abilities to monitor completion by board members. I think that's the way to go, given the volume of material we have to cover. But it's open to discussion, starting with you in the coming weeks and months. How would that be as a way to move forward at this point?
Excuse me, Regent Porth, would it be
Yes.
appropriate to offer an amendment to the policy? And before offering it, I'll just say what it is. In number 3, A, and that's then you've got the 15 requirements or subject matter for the education. Number 1 is duties to state and CSU. I would just say, comma, including mission, vision, and goals.
Yep.
At least then, I mean, I know we've got 15 that says it's sort of the catch-all, anything else that we deem necessary, but I don't think that gives the level of importance to what our overall mission is. And by adding that to number 1, I think that helps that.
Okay, you want to put that into a motion, Don?
I would move that we amend our policy on required training for members of the Board of Regents such that under Roman numeral 3A, number 1, duties to the state and CSU be amended to read duties to the state and CSU, comma, including mission, vision, and goals.
Can I get a second on that?
I would second that.
Okay. Further discussion on this. This is an important issue. And Don, thanks for offering that. Ira.
I don't think that addresses the policy in part. It doesn't address the resolution, which is the most public part of what we're going to be doing. So I think something along the lines of what Don has talked about, I think has to be in the resolution. The resolution is what more people are going to see.
You could put-
Regent Bloom, can I ask you a question? So would you, the first whereas clause, would you like the language that Regent Williams just proposed included in the initial whereas clause that would make the reference to the mission, vision, and goals.
Right, and thanks, Felicia. I'm comfortable with that. Ira needs to be as
Say
well.
that again. I wasn't totally
So-
clear on what.
When in the initial whereas clause, we could actually add the language that Regent Williams just proposed as well.
So that the exact same language would be in the resolution, Ira. The exact same language
If
in the exact same place.
if I could, I would suggest that maybe that should go in paragraph 4, the fourth,
Right.
whereas, which
Right.
describes specifically the training.
Right.
Okay.
I agree with you. So that in other words, the fourth whereas would say, such training shall include the duties of board members to the state of Connecticut and the Connecticut State Colleges and University System, comma, including mission, vision, and goals, and then et cetera.
Yeah, or
I actually like it better in the first
Yes,
whereas, Don.
I agree with
I think
Juanita.
right up front, I like it
It needs
right
to
up
be,
front in the first
it needs
whereas,
to be up front.
because people
This
often
can't be
don't read
buried.
past, yeah.
What we're about can't be buried.
what I would suggest then is, given that there's nothing wrong with repetition, it actually can help strengthen a message, is that we put it in the first and fourth. So we would add it. Let's see, where would it go in the first paragraph? Depends on it. That's well informed about its legal responsibilities, comma, scope of authority, comma, right after scope of authority, mission, vision, and goals, comma, and the institutions it oversees. So if we put it there, and then in the fourth paragraph, shall include, let's see, state of Connecticut colleges system. Right after that first semicolon, colleges and university system, semicolon, the mission, vision, and goals of CSCU, semicolon, et cetera.
Yeah, so Ira, Don's offering an amendment to the motion that we have before us. Anybody want to second that amendment? So we're going to put that same language in two places in the resolution, in the first whereas and the fourth whereas, where we talk about mission, vision, and goals, including student success.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Ira.
There's another piece that we don't really say anything about, and maybe we don't want to, but the higher education world is being roiled by events coming from Washington, and you know the board can't be the board has to understand what's happening in our higher education, in a larger higher education world, as well as the narrow world of Connecticut and CSCU. I mean, changes in financial aid policy affects everybody in the country. And I don't know where, but I think that has to somehow be, you know, we want the new incoming board members to understand that there's a bigger world that affects. I mean, those of us who live with this, you know, it's there, but we're talking about people coming on the board, presumably not coming from the same world at the moment until they're on the board.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and you do that for us on a regular basis in meetings. I would point out that the current resolution that we have in front of us, the fourth whereas includes a clause that says current and emerging issues in higher education, which could be modified from year to year with regard to this training, depending on what's happening. Does that satisfy what you're talking about, Ira?
The fourth clause is very important, but that buries a lot of things. It buries a lot of things in one place.
Do you?
I think maybe that's okay. Maybe it isn't okay.
Other discussion.
I think we're getting closer, Rick.
Okay.
Current and emerging issues in higher education is so general. I would almost say impacting current issues and policies impacting higher education, something along the lines of, and I think that if you add that language specifically, not current and emergent issues, but the effective governance of a system depends on a board that's informed about its legal responsibilities. That's true. The scope of its authority, the institution it oversees, and the issues or resolutions or policies or external federal things that affect higher education. I think that's part of it. And that's not the language. Don, you're much better at actually crafting the language than I am, but I think you know what I'm getting after. Our responsibility is absolutely to oversee governance, but we need to have some context of the things happening in higher education that affect us, right? There's a difference between just being generally knowledge about trends and emerging issues. It's really more about policies that impact our governance abilities or our ability to exercise
I think you've just hit the nail on the head when they affect our ability to govern the system.
What I would suggest is right now we have a motion on the floor to amend the first whereas with the language that I had talked about before about mission, vision, and goals. Then we had an amendment to the amendment. Before we took a vote on that first amendment, we have an amendment to the amendment to not only add that in paragraph 4 in the way that was described, but in paragraph 1. And I hope someone was taking notes in terms of where that would be inserted in both. But right now we're on the amendment to the First Amendment. So we need to vote on adding that language to the first whereas. And then if that passes, we have an amendment that adds it to the first and fourth paragraph. We need to vote on that. And then we can proceed to this other issue. So I would want to call the question on the amendment to the amendment and vote on that. And if that passes, then we'll vote on the amendment, which will effectively add it to paragraph 1 and 4. So this would be, I'd be calling the question on voting on the amendment to the amendment.
Yeah.
Can we just withdraw the First Amendment and put all of this in one amendment?
Well, the way we did it was that
we already voted on the First Amendment?
No, we didn't vote on it, but it was made and seconded. So that's the amendment that's on the floor right now. Then there was an amendment to the amendment. So I trust it'll be pretty quick if we vote on the amendment to the amendment and then vote on the original amendment. That's all. That's all we have to do right now.
I understand from Robert's Rules of Order exactly what you're saying. So we'd have to do it that way as opposed to just, even though we first and seconded the First Amendment, we can't just withdraw the First Amendment. So that we incorporate these amended changes. In other words, we can't pull it all together and say, then we would vote on the resolution as amended, and we would have all of those things. And
we could. It takes roughly the same amount of time, but we can withdraw the first amendment. I can say, let's withdraw the First Amendment, and whoever seconded that would agree. So
yes.
I would agree. Yeah.
So we'll do
I would
that.
agree with that.
So that's withdrawn. That basically kills the Second Amendment that was proposed, or the amendment that was opposed. So now I would move that we add that language as was described as before to both paragraph 1 and paragraph 4, and look for a second to that.
Second.
Thanks, Ira. So we have a motion and a second to add the language we've been discussing both in paragraph 1 and in paragraph 4. Any further discussion on that motion? If not, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of this resolution as amended by the current motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, good. Don, thanks for your help on that. Good thing Don's with us, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We
But
did-
now we need an amendment to the amendment we just voted on, which is whether or not we include language specific to adding language around the sort of external policies or government policies that might impact our awareness of government policies that might affect our ability to govern. That very last piece we haven't put in there yet.
Further discussion on that. I honestly thought the motion we just voted on did that, but let's
Oh,
have.
you thought it did? Is that everyone's understanding that we included both pieces, not just that we included all of the discussion that we've been having? Was that your understanding too, Don?
No, no, we just voted on, we withdrew the motion to add mission, vision, goals to paragraph 1 only, and we were going to, or paragraph 4 only, and then we substituted that with paragraph, add that mission, vision, goals language to both paragraph 1 and paragraph 4 regarding training.
Right, but we have not.
That the policy or this resolution now has been amended,
Right.
and now there's a question: do we need to amend the resolution again in a way that provides some extra training in responsibilities or knowledge of laws that affect the board? But I think we need some specifics on what that is. I mean,
what that language is.
Yeah,
right.
what are we specifically trying to require here?
So, and based on the conversation we've had over the last few minutes, my suggestion is that we amend the resolution once again and add the words after and the institutions it oversees, and then colon and emerging issues in higher education to paragraph 1 as well. But that's open to discussion. And I, as chair, I should make that motion myself.
You want to say emerging national issues in higher education?
If you'd like, sure. There will be state issues too.
Yes, national and state issues.
That's fine. Everybody okay with that? I know that's not Robert's Rules way of getting consensus, but so national
And
state and national, emerging state and national issues in higher education. Okay.
Is that are we talking about training there? If so, wouldn't that be better in paragraph 4? I mean, paragraph 1 is the big picture.
That is, but this is also part of the big picture, Don, isn't it?
Okay. All right. If that's the intention, then yes.
Okay. Any further
Regent Porth,
discussion?
do you have a second for your motion?
Not yet.
I'm not even
because we're
sure
still
if I'm
we're
supposed
still
to make the
trying.
motion.
Regent Porth can't make the motion. One of us needs to,
Right.
and I think we're still
Right.
trying to get some clarity specifically around the language. And I think we were I think we got it right.
Yeah, I do
But
too.
somebody else needs to make the motion.
Right, that's right.
And I'm not going to make the motion because I'm not as clear about the language as the way you have just presented it, Rick. So either Ira or Don, if you do that, I'll second it.
Yeah,
I'll
I'm not
make the
100%
motion.
clear either.
Okay.
So what I was proposing, and if we can say it better, please, by all means. What I was proposing was to add a new clause in paragraph 1 after the institution it oversees. And the new clause would say, and emerging state and national issues in higher education.
Okay, I will make the motion to approve the language as stated by, that you just stated.
Second, anybody second that?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
So in paragraph 1, it would, let's just figure out precisely where it would go. Well informed about its legal responsibilities, the scope of its authorities, the institutions it oversees, semicolon, and
Yeah,
Emerging state and national issues.
affecting education,
Affecting higher education.
okay, emerging state and national issues affecting higher education. Okay, so I'm clear on that. All right, that's all.
okay. Great, thank you. So I think we've had a motion and a second and discussion. All in favor of that latest motion, signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? I just want to say, I know we've spent a fair amount of time on this, but I think it's important, and I appreciate the feedback of everybody on this. Cameron and Felicia, I hope you followed this discussion, but I think we have a better resolution as a result of it. So now that we've
And I appreciate the amount of work that obviously has gone into
yes,
doing this resolution and the work. I think in fairness, whenever
Yes.
we have a committee meeting, we've got to allow for, I think the expectation that as soon as we see a resolution for the first time, that we are going to be able to noodle through it, offer comments, and approve it immediately. So we might just want to build that into the expectations, because we're doing a lot of work in this area, and we'll continue to do a lot of work in this area. But somewhere we just still have to have that room to have the conversation, and like the one we just had.
You're right. You're right.
Instead of
Juanita, for
feeling
sure.
pressured that we have, it's something that we have to see for the, I wouldn't say see for the first time. We got the information yesterday, which is again, not a lot of advanced time to really noodle through it, but there are several, these processes just take a little bit longer when it comes to, because they're legal and they're binding and they're public and all of those things.
Yeah, I think you're right, Juanita. And look, I'll take responsibility for that. Poor Felicia's been trying to get this agenda package out for a while now, and I'll take responsibility for it being slow. We will try in the future to give at least a few days advance notice on this type of with regard to the agenda package. Hope that's okay, Felicia. Everybody okay? All right, good. Thank you. Let's move on then. So we've adopted the agenda. Is there any further discussion on how we deliver this? I think I'll just say this once more. What's being proposed today is very different from how at least I envisioned it a year ago or so. And I do think not only does it make more sense, a more practical sense, but I think the idea of one initial orientation meeting in person and then these asynchronous modules will help us be much more flexible in the future about how we deliver this. And so I appreciate that recommendation from staff. Any other comments on that part of this?
I think it's a good process to have both.
Yeah.
Just because of the volume of information that we have to become familiar with.
I agree. And we've used that in other places where I've been, and it seems to have worked very well with the modules.
Yes.
Was it the
Yeah, so
asynchronous?
thank you.
If we want to do it at 4 a.m, we can do it at 4 a.m, or whatever.
Right. And so thanks for that. And also acknowledge, I know this is going to take a lot of work to put together these modules in NeoGov, but I think once we have them, we can build on them, tweak them, modify them, and we'll have a good way to provide an orientation and ongoing training for people going forward. So thanks. Everybody okay with that topic?
Yeah, we still have to go back to the implementation schedule. Because right now it says the final preparation for the implementation schedule is early September. And we've already said that we want to spend a little bit more time in terms of the some of the presentation in the module. And you said we'd have to have some flexibility. So, and that was where most of the discussion happened in terms of the balance between the compliance and the sort of the mission that, you know, the more than the compliance issues. So the schedule, I'm just wondering if we need to have another meeting around the presentation itself that addresses some of the questions we asked earlier, you know, the training itself. But if I'm off base, I, you know, Dot and Ira, you know, weigh in on that one.
Ira.
One of the things we can use, I think, I mean, some of the things we want the new regents to know is who the key officers are in the system that they. We could spend a few minutes at the beginning of a regents meeting when everybody is there, all the presidents are there, you know, and dedicated to quote training and introduce the presidents, introduce the senior staff. So the incoming people at least will be familiar with who the people are. And you know, at a time when we're there and when we're all present anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense, Ira. That makes sense. And then on Juanita's point, I think you're right. And I'd like to recommend, based on what we just did, that we move forward and recommend the resolution to the full board for the next meeting.
Yeah.
And that we, with regard to the schedule, we push it back a few weeks. I would propose that we ask staff leaders to modify that first, the agenda for the first in-person meeting based on the discussion we had, and then come up with a timeline that reflects this discussion and the need for a few modifications to the delivery schedule. Is that okay with people? Okay, that's what we'll do.
You know, just one other sidebar comment is at the end of the training, it would be wonderful if there was a Regents handbook. It would be wonderful if the important points and all the different topics that we covered were committed to paper that we could access online, of course, too. But a handbook is a nice thing. If a question comes up at 10:30 at night someday and you're wondering, you know, what's our responsibility here? Who handles this? What should we be informed about, given our roles on the board? It would be nice to have something to go to, as opposed to, wow, I wonder where I put my notes to that session 6 months ago.
Right.
So which might be, depending on how organized we are, just right there. But some kind of handbook would be good too. And the handbook could actually be what we used to call a Facebook, you know, before it got stolen by social media, you know, with the, and a lot of this is online already to start with, right? The presidents of the institutions, but what was just mentioned, some of the key folks that we would want to be introduced to. All those types of things would help to be pulled together in a kind of Regents handbook.
Right. I think that's a good suggestion. Sorry to put you on the spot, staff leaders, but can someone work with me to begin to put something together? Felicia, just so you know,
Regent
Felicia.
Miss Beckett, Jessica is probably about to make a statement about that, if you want to recognize her.
Jessica.
Chair Porth, thank you, and good morning, everyone. This is, you know, since I've come back to the office, this is actually something that we're focusing on, and it's been kind of a topic of discussion between Felicia and I regarding developing a handbook, along with various other foundational operation, you know, kind of processes, standard operating procedures, even from the staff side, to ensure that the board is properly prepared, whether it's, onboarding or, through regular committee meetings and just the general annual cycle. So that's something that Felicia and I are kind of working through, kind of best practices. And the first topic was the handbook.
That's great.
Excellent. It really is great. And I was going to say too, Felicia just helped me get a copy of the of a simple handbook type document on best practices for higher ed governance from the Association of Governing Boards, AGB, which could be used too to help put this together, or at least referred to. Felicia and I were trying to figure out how to share that with the rest of the board. But Don, good suggestion. Jessica, Felicia, thanks for offering to help us do that. Everybody okay? Thanks. All right, let's move to the next agenda item. And this sort of relates to what Don was just talking about. Has to do with a discussion of a board commitment statement. This is just me thinking out loud. The other thing that has concerned me for some time now is even when we have retreats or try to do training, it's not always clear that every board member has, I can say it carefully, has internalized what we've learned about good governance. And apparently that's been the case in other places too. And the Michigan State commitment statement that we shared with you along with today's agenda is designed to do that. It's a more formal way to ask board members to say, yes, I understand this is how we intend to work together. And yes, I do commit to that. So a couple more words and we can have a discussion. But it's just my idea. I ran it. I think that our board chair, Ari Santiago, is aware of the fact that I'm raising this issue. He hasn't agreed or disagreed yet, but I thought it was worth spending a few minutes today on it. So this is all about how to promote awareness of good governance practices and a commitment to those practices. Marty Guay used to say, let's do the right thing and do it the right way. That's what this is all about. How can BOR members work with each other in the most constructive way? And how can we work with system leaders and other stakeholders inside and outside the system in a way that serves the system and follows the best governance practices? That's what this is about. And I don't know if people had a chance to, we only sent this out yesterday, but I would recommend, clearly, based on the discussion we just had, it would be, I'm not going to ask for formal agreement at this stage, but I'd love to at least start to get feedback from people. What you have attached to your agenda are 8 governance commitments, and they're really, in my opinion, they cover almost all of what we've been talking about. And it talks about, and if you'll permit me, I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to summarize this quickly. It says the board's role is oversight, fiduciary, and hiring the president, but the president manages the university and supervises the institutional leaders and does the decision-making related to achieving institutional goals. The very first one has to do with, in my opinion, the most important governance issue is our role and how it differs from, but is cohesive with what the chancellor does. Second item is administrators and university employees report to the president, not to us, and that the board respects these reporting structures. Third one is when we ask for information, that they should be provided through channels of communication and through formal presentations. If we make supplemental requests as regents, typically they should be made through the president or agreed designees. We act as fiduciary And that means we put our interest or anyone else's interest secondary to the fiduciary standing of CSCU. Our primary job, I think, is how we interact with the chancellor, and that involves an annual evaluation process. That's spelled out in the fourth item. Excuse me, in the fifth item. The sixth one has to do with the board chair speaks publicly on behalf of the board with regard to our powers and responsibilities vested in the board and on decisions that the board has made. Individual trustees may speak on their own behalf, but not on behalf of the board. We respect agreed upon board communication process, and we won't create independent public declarations. To be honest, that's an issue I think we've had trouble with in the past. And I would hope that we could make a more formal commitment to that. Seventh one is private discussions on board issues will be held in confidence. Once a vote has been taken and each of us have recorded our position, we'll collectively respect that power is only invested in the board as a whole, not in individual trustees, and that the majority vote is the board's final decision. Occasionally, I think we've bumped into that issue. And then finally, and I think this is really important too, and I think we've made good strides in this, much of our work takes place in committees. We trust and support our board committees to conduct their work fairly and thoroughly. We actively participate on the board committees to which we're assigned, and we support the board's vote on committee recommendations. These are 8, what I would describe as fairly straightforward, fairly simple commitments to good governance. We could design something different, but my whole reason for bringing this up is to ask you whether you think, as I do, that we needed some way to get a more formal acknowledgement and commitment to these governance principles. Anyone?
So Rick, I'm all in favor of this. What I had a chance to skim it last night.
Yeah.
But what I didn't have the chance to do was look at the board roles and responsibilities work that you had already done, that we've already signed off on,
Yeah.
and compare it to see if there are any areas that we're missing and I think we do need time to do that because we've
Yeah.
also been working on this and, on the face of it, it seems like it captures everything, but not enough time to say, oh, wait a minute, we also made this point or we talked about that or missed something. So I really would like to have a little bit more time to see how this compares with what we've already talked about and talked about. But I absolutely like a formal commitment of terms of, agreeing that this is the behavior we expect of the board.
Thanks,
And-
Wendy,
and,
and good point.
and if-
Point well taken.
If I could just to follow Juanita's comment, which is right on point. I think we've already actually not only talked and thought about this, but adopted
Yes.
expectations for the board that covers most, if not all, of these points and more in terms of speaking. The chair speaks for the board. And that how to work with the media and refer things to the appropriate person, the chancellor or the chairman of the board, et cetera. I don't have that document right in front of me, but I know it exists and we could pull that. So I think we want to go back, but I think as I read this document, I think it tracks a lot of the same points.
Yeah.
So we should take a look at that.
Yeah.
And we should see exactly what we did with that. Did we adopt that as a formal policy per se, or did we just adopt that as expectations for board members? The only thing that I would take issue with in this Michigan document is number 1, which, as you pointed out, Rick, is probably the most important paragraph. And there's a lot that's right about paragraph 1, but it stops short big time in terms of also explaining that I presume in Michigan, as is the case in the state of Connecticut per state statute, the Board of Regents is the policy making board. We are not just the resource and advisor to the president,
Right.
or in this case, the chancellor. that diminishes our role significantly. And especially when you follow it up with the final sentence, the president manages the university, direction, supervision, all decision-making abilities to achieve institutional goals. No, that's not the way it works. The Board of
That's right.
Regents set the policy. The chancellor and the staff carry out that policy.
Yeah.
And that needs to be clearly stated.
Again, points well taken, really important. I guess in presenting this Michigan State document to all of you, my purpose wasn't necessarily to ask that we adopt this verbatim, but only to put on the table for your feedback whether we could get a more formal commitment, a written commitment to whatever standards. And on Juanita's point, I practically have our roles and responsibilities memorized because we worked on this for a long time with Terry McTaggart's help. And so I'm not recommending that we adopt this Michigan State policy. What I'm asking is, could we come up with a document that might include some of this language, but also would include some of our roles and responsibilities that we could ask people to actually sign in a more formal way? Or am I overthinking this?
Yeah, I think Don's point that we think we already did that. The question is, how formal were we in the signing piece may be the open question. And I'd like to go back and see. Don, I think we put it on the consent agenda that we were adopting it, but we didn't.
Yeah,
I'm
we
not
did.
sure. Yeah, I'm not sure we asked people to sign something, and I think it's a good idea for people to sign something.
Ira.
Now, we also have to take account. I mean, we've talked about this, as Juanita said, a number of times, and we need to take account of shared governance somewhere in this document. And we've talked about situations where we may want the chancellor to consult with the board or a board committee, even though the chancellor has a responsibility for managing and carrying out. It doesn't preclude, on some issues, the chancellor consulting with the regents.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. So I hope I put this in with the agenda today. Thank you, Felicia, for helping me do that. Not to suggest that we adopt this verbatim, but to talk about the idea of getting a written commitment. And maybe based on the feedback being provided, all good feedback from all of you, we take another look at the roles and responsibilities statement that we put together and see if that could be modified and propose that we get written commitments to those.
Yeah.
Would that be acceptable to you?
Well, Rick, I'd go one step further. I'd just like the staff to go back and look at what we've already put on the agenda, what we've already signed off on, to make sure that we're not either
think we have to.
contradicting or duplicate. I think that's an important piece of this.
Okay.
Regent Porth, can I suggest maybe that the staff, I see the roles and responsibilities that you all adopted last winter. Maybe get some reading internally on the implications of that for you all. I do want to bring one other thing to your attention. We will probably need to amend the agenda. Mr. Liston has an appointment at 11:30, and he has another matter that he needs to speak with you all about, which is the animals on campus. So I think I would propose that that there's a motion to amend to move up agenda item number 8 so that he can facilitate that discussion with you all. And then following your vote on that, resume the discussion of the bylaws.
Okay. I'm not opposed to doing that. I just want to close this last issue that we were discussing. I think based on all of the really good feedback, that our next step, and tell me if I got this right, is that as the chair of this committee, I need to work with staff to review the roles and responsibilities we adopted some months ago to see how it could be adapted to include a commitment to sign something that could related to those roles and responsibilities. Is that accurate? Everybody okay?
I would want to review what we did in that roles and responsibilities, particularly with our relationship to the chancellor, given what we have recently gone through.
Yeah.
We can't diminish whatever statutory powers and responsibilities we have as a board, because there are times that may arise when we have to use those responsibilities and powers.
Okay. Felicia, can I
I
ask
agree.
you
I
to
agree with that.
circulate the roles and responsibility to the members of this committee? And I will ask each of you to mark it up and let us know whether any of that needs to be amended. We should do that, as Don suggests. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah, I'm just going back to, I'd just like to review what we already signed off on. So
Yep,
see
absolutely.
where the gaps are. Yeah.
It's a real good point. And so, Felicia, if you could help us do that, that would be great. And you and I can work on something that we bring back to the next meeting.
Okay.
Everybody okay? Okay, can I entertain a motion to amend the agenda to move number 8 up on the agenda to the next item?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's go to approval of a new policy or a policy revision. It's the policy is animals on campus. And the idea would be for us to review it with Cameron's help, and if we agree to move it on to the full board. Cameron?
Thank you, and I appreciate the flexibility. So today we have some revisions that were presented to us by the CT State Director of Disability Services to update some of our definitions in the Animals on Campus policy as related to new guidance and updates to the federal regulations and state law in this space. In addition to providing additional clarity around what public spaces are, which is something that just wasn't clearly defined in the current version of the policy. You will find those changes outlined in the chart under definitional changes. So you'll see the changes to service animal and training, emotional support animal, handler, public spaces, and then CSU campuses that previously exempted or separated CSU from CT State. So those changes are highlighted there. This is all about complying with federal regulations and ensuring that we have consistent definitions with those regulations and guidance that has been coming out as recently as this past summer from HUD and the interpretation of the FHA. And then the second piece is reorganization. The previous policy was repetitive because instead of being listed by animal designation, so service animal, ESA, and pet, it was actually listed by individual association with the institution and then repeated each of those underneath it, even though the standards are the same for them all. So the restructuring here has allowed us to shorten the policy, make it more user-friendly, because the actual obligations we have to service animals and ESAs and pets are the same regardless of whether somebody's an employee, student, visitor. So it is just simplified in that manner. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and I do apologize for the tight timeline here. And if this is not a matter ready for voting today, that is fine. We can bring this back up at a future meeting.
My only question was the miniature horse. That was the first time that
It is not common. In the review process, we did ask if we had ever had that request at any institutions, and the answer was no. But it is still included in the obligation, so we include it here. It is very limited circumstances because obviously you must analyze whether or not there's a threat to physical safety based on the structure it would be entering and things along those nature, including health and hygiene, right? Because they are much more difficult to have house trained than a dog.
Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Is it clear?
Ira.
Is it clear that what we're saying is animals that are strictly pets, correct, are not allowed. Animals that perform service functions are what we're talking about here.
So we did not eliminate the pet provisions that were in there. So the current policy itself allows for fish in up to 20-gallon tank. Instead of having that be an obligatory allowance, we actually returned that to the institutions that they can determine whether or not, pets are allowed anywhere. We have no external obligations regarding pets within any of our buildings. But some of our institutions do allow residence hall staff to have pets, but it's certainly not an external obligation. That's clarified.
Other questions or comments?
So this miniature horse can be brought into a classroom if it's a service animal. Is that whatever?
That
this
is correct.
miniature horse is?
In certain very limited circumstances, it could happen. Again, I haven't seen it here. I haven't seen it at any institution I've worked at, but it is still federal law, so we have included that.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
There are instances when people stretch the notion of emotional support animal, and they can be disruptive in the classroom if they're not well trained in a setting like a classroom.
And the federal changes to ESAs were actually restricting it or giving more flexibility for institutions to not allow them in certain spaces. They raised kind of the threshold questions regarding ASAs and made it much more akin to service animals in terms of their participation. So what these changes do for us is allow our institutions to implement that into their interactive process and actually analyze that on a case-by-case basis as one means of potential effective accommodation, not the mandatory effective accommodation.
Everybody okay? Is it accurate to say, Cameron, that this policy being recommended for approval today to this committee, the revisions are designed to put our policy in compliance with federal law or regulation?
Correct. Yes, the substantive changes are explicitly that. The structural changes are really just about ease of access for our folks reading the policy.
Okay.
Everybody okay?
Yep. I'll move adoption of the resolution.
Thanks. We'll need a second. Anyone? Ira seconds. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, good. Thanks, Cameron. Thanks, everyone. And Cameron, does this go to the full board now?
Yes, this would be a recommendation to the full board, and we can present there if you'd like, or you can present it depending on your preference.
Great. Thanks, Cameron.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go back to the agenda, and I'm going to hope it's okay with you, but I'm going to try to move through this pretty efficiently to respect your time. The next item is a review of the bylaws. And you have a copy of the bylaws attached to the agenda package. You also have a link to the bylaws on our website. Again, in the interest of time, I reviewed these just yesterday, and I've looked at a million different bylaws over the years, and these look pretty standard to me in terms of how bylaws work. I have a couple observations. We need somebody on the staff to review it to make sure everything is up to date with regard to citations and in the law or regulation, and with regard to any other changes that might affect statutory or legal changes that might affect our bylaws. That's number one. And if you agree, we'll do that before we'll ask for that before you finish today. Number two has to do with the definition on page 4 of the bylaws of the executive and governance committee. this is a topic that's come up recently, and I don't expect that we'll resolve this today. But there was a time a year or so ago, under our former chair, where it was recommended that the executive committee be disbanded and that the governance committee step in and play that role. But it never was formally adopted. It showed up in the minutes, the meeting minutes of a meeting some months back, but it was never formally adopted the way we would any policy like this. So we officially still have a set of bylaws that addresses both an executive committee and a governance committee. My own personal feeling after some discussion with others is that we probably should just leave the executive committee and the governance committee, but define more carefully, either here or somewhere else, what specifically are the roles of each. And I'll stop there and ask if we could have just a few minutes of discussion so we can get a sense of what you think should happen going forward. Anybody?
So Rick, go ahead, Ira, you start.
Okay, go ahead, Winnie, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I think we need a whole meeting to talk about these bylaws.
Okay.
I started with the language that says that how many board members need to be on the board. And I was a little surprised to see that we're as specific as 23 as opposed to other bylaws where I've seen up to 23 as
Yeah.
opposed to being required. And then as I started digging deeper, I had more and more questions and I didn't have time to go that deep. So, even the language about the specificity of the appointee requirements and which ones they are. And so I think this one really needs a look in terms of these bylaws were created a very, very, very long time ago. And, in terms of looking at, are they do they capture what we need in terms of the future of where we are as a system and how things have changed? So, uh, I did not have time to make extensive notes on everything, but since I started on page 25 and then realized I was going deeper and deeper into it, I just wondered how we were going to get through it today.
Yeah, we can't. Thank you, Juanita. Good point. We can't get through it today, and so Juanita's suggesting a special meeting. I will say this: my understanding is that much of what's in our bylaws, including the composition of our board, is spelled out in state statute. We don't have much flexibility in terms of how we are composed, at least based on the state statute. But if the general consensus here is that we should devote a special meeting to the bylaws, then we'll do that. Other comments or thoughts?
Well, we have asked each committee to look at the description it's of it in the bylaws and come back to us about that. And I think if my memory, I don't always trust my memory these days, but we had an extensive conversation about the executive committee and limiting it to emergency actions with a definition, I think,
Yep.
in there about what emergency meant. And I think there was some feeling, and certainly my feeling, that we needed to have that in case some disaster occurred. Not that the executive committee would perform any kind of routine function, but if something happened that required board action and it was difficult to convene the board, we'd have a mechanism to deal with it.
You're correct, Ira. We did have extensive discussion about that and had some documentation about what that was going to be. Again, the question is, was it ever formally voted on, or was it in a consent agenda, or was it still in discussion or presented to the board? And that's the part that I don't remember.
Yeah, I think the same thing, Ira. I agree with Juanita. You're right. And the way you described the responsibility of the executive committee, that's what I recall too. But I think we need to formalize that, especially given, the confusion over what we might or might not have done last
Mhm.
year. Other questions or comments?
Is there any opportunity for us to appeal to the state for some of these statutes if we feel that, because again, the statutes may be, they were made a long time ago. I just wonder, is there a mechanism for us to go to the state for particular things and ask that certain statutes either be amended or updated? Don, is there any way for us to do something like that?
Of course, yes. You could seek amendments to how folks are appointed. The issue is that when it was originally drafted, it was done in a way that each legislative caucus was given some ability, and the governor's office, to appoint and therefore have a stake in the membership of the Board of Regents. And there was some specific expertise that was being sought, or some background in some case, in terms of who would be appointed, that type of thing. So you will see in some cases specific descriptions, but it's certainly very specific as to the leadership. And if you wanted to change that, that could be very difficult because it's already been worked out as to the various caucuses and how many appointments they get.
So Don, just to try to be clear, do we need to get the full legislature to make an amendment to the statutes that authorize us? Or can that be
Yes.
done in a less
Yes.
formal way?
No. The statute governs, and it can only be changed by by an amendment to the statute that would have to pass both chambers and be signed by the governor.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean we can't look at those things and say, actually, if we rewrote it in this way, we feel like each of the respective caucuses and the executive branch are still getting their representation, and we would just like to make these suggestions. There's nothing that prevents us from doing that, and seeing how it plays out.
Yeah. I think the question more, and again, this isn't like immediate priority, but for example, the role of the board in recommending, there's no formal role for us to actually even recommend appointments to the Board of Regents. And I just wonder if we could at least create a mechanism where we make recommendations to the legislators or to the governor to say, because it's in a different topic when we talk about the expertise of the members of the board and what we need. It's sort of like, how do we create a mechanism to build a stronger board with the complexity of things like AI and cybersecurity? There's so many different things that are affecting us, and is there a way for us to really rethink the appointment process, or at least something leading up to the appointment process that involves more recommendation and interaction from board members? As we're the ones who are sitting in the seats, right? And we see where the opportunities are and where the challenges are, and the way the appointments have been described, they're very specific, for example, to particular institutions or community. There's just a lot in here that was built on before I think we really created this system,
Well,
and yeah, that's really what my questions. I think it's just worthy of a conversation.
we should consider that further. It's certainly done on an informal basis. The appointing authorities in the legislature oftentimes are grateful to get particular recommendations. It doesn't mean that they will necessarily agree and say, oh, yes, you've given us this recommendation, so we're going to automatically put this person forward. But they're open to that, and oftentimes they're grateful for those recommendations.
Yeah, and one example is Martin Mooney has never really hasn't filled that vacancy for what, 3 years, 4 years, 5, before I came on the board. And we do have some vacant positions that it's not required that they be filled, but it also limits the number of board members we can assign to committees. So it's one of those things of, if we keep getting smaller and smaller, or we don't fill certain kinds of gaps, it puts that much more of a weight and a burden on the existing regions.
Yeah, that's true. And we are going to have a quick executive session where we talk about the vacancies on the current board and members that need to be hopefully re-upped by our appointing authorities. And this is a part of that, Juanita. This is a part of that. And Adam, I think, has toughed it out. He's still with us. He'll talk to us briefly in just a couple minutes about what the current status is and make suggestions on how we can move this forward. But we should also be talking about how it might be changed in a way that could speed this up a little bit, which I think is your point. Yeah. Any other discussion on that? So I think what I'm hearing, everyone, is that we're going to, with Felicia's help, try to schedule a special meeting just to discuss these bylaws. Again, I say this again, a lot of our bylaws are defined by current statute. And if we really want to change them, it's going to have to require the kind of process that Don just described. Okay.
Mhm.
But it would be good to do the special meeting, especially also because of this issue of executive committee and governance committee. Ira's right. I think we agreed to what the to specifically define the executive committee's role, and then we can use the governance committee's charter to define that. But do we decide to put it into the bylaws or somewhere else in a formal way? So we okay with that, everyone?
Mm-hmm.
It might be helpful to set it up, Rick, and if we can, the materials for the meeting in a kind of parallel column, so we can see what the current bylaws are, what our where they conflict with our current policies, if they do conflict with our current policies, so you can see it, see them next to each other.
Okay. Felicia and I can work on that, but we'll also, first priority is to get a special meeting scheduled. We don't have to rush this, but we can get a special meeting scheduled and spend some time on these issues. Everybody okay with that?
And I think we need, once the meeting is scheduled, we need time after the material is circulated to digest it before the meeting.
I know. Again, my bad. We will do that. All right. Next on the agenda is part of our charge is to review committee charters. We have none on the agenda today. We have asked, the Office of Board Affairs has had contact with our committee chairs and their administrative contacts to facilitate review and revision to their charters. So that process is in motion, and when one becomes available, we'll put it on our agenda for future review. But that process is in motion. Everybody okay on that? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then finally is this discussion of the appointment process. And given the time at this point, I'll ask that we try to do this quickly, but I know that Adam is still with us and was going to make a quick presentation on this because Juanita's right. This has become an urgent issue for us, and we need, starting here in our committee, to get that process rolling. It is already, to be fair, but to try to nudge it along and to do that in a systematic way. Adam, can you speak briefly about where we stand and what the current status is, please?
Sure. Thank you, Regent Forth, and I appreciate the invitation to be with you today. Included in your packet are two documents related to this. One is the memo that I provided. It's an updated version of the memo that I provided last June that lays out the statutory framework for the appointment process to the board, which appointing authorities require certain criteria for those appointments, and then the sort of practical appointment process and how that happens. I won't belabor and go through it all because we covered it a couple minutes ago, but regarding the status of current regent appointments, we have a number of regents who are currently serving on terms that have expired. Regents serve until until their reappointment is either confirmed by the legislature or another person is so far qualified and appointed by the General Assembly, or sorry, confirmed by the General Assembly. Regent Santiago, Porth, Bloom, and Jappanen terms have currently expired. Regent Balducci's term expires in June of 27. There are currently 4 vacancies on the board, 2 governor's appointments and 2 legislative appointments. And we have the student regent elections this semester. Those are held yearly. That is the current status. Regent appointments will likely be considered during the upcoming session of the Connecticut General Assembly, which begins the first Wednesday after the first Monday of January, with hearings likely to take place in February and March, confirmation hearings. Does anybody have any questions just about where we currently stand with our current regent appointments or the process in general?
I'll just say, real quick, Adam, I appreciate you putting this all together in one place. And I know you updated it, made some modifications too, based on some earlier feedback. But to summarize, we have Ari, me, Ira, and Sophia. Our appointments are coming, they actually just have passed. And plus there are 4 other vacant positions on our board. We need to move on those things. And that's summarized real well in Adam's memo and presentation. We started to collect names. Juanita's provided a name, Ari's provided a name, I've provided a name. We never have formally discussed these publicly, because I think in fairness to these people, they need to be notified, which we have not done as far as I know. And that's the reason why we need to go into an executive session to start talking about specific people and to get Adam and other people's advice and help on how to finally move this along. And I shouldn't say it that way. I know people continue to work on this on our behalf, but it's urgent, I would say, at this point in time, given the number of people whose terms have just ended or the number of vacancies. Any other comments based on Adam's presentation? Anyone?
I have a request of Adam.
Sure.
Because I think I like the fact that we've put this expertise of the current regents, because it helps to inform us of what we think we need in terms of what's missing, what additional expertise, or if that person departs. But I will say for mine, for example, it is not accurately captured all my areas of expertise, because I also have expertise in marketing, communications, human resources, strategic planning, and enterprise technology implementation. And I'm thinking if we're missing that on mine, the other regions we may not also have captured. So it might be just helpful to send out a little questionnaire and ask the regions what areas of expertise do they have, so that we just have a more complete picture.
So
Sure,
Vice
happy to
Chair
add.
James, can I just say in Mr. Joseph's defense, Karen had actually asked the board office to pull together some information earlier in the spring, and we primarily took it off the website, but the board office can certainly reach out to each of you.
Yeah, I think the website probably captures sort of like more the recent titles, et cetera, and so forth. We just may have more, we just might have more diverse expertise than we realize we have. If we go back to the, regents and ask them for it. So, okay, I withdraw that request from Adam. I make that request to you, Felicia.
Very good.
It's a good suggestion, and I think it'll be helpful to us. Other questions or comments on Adam's presentation? In just a moment, we'll go into a very quick executive session where we'll talk about some specific names for recommendation and how we might advance those names, to Juanita's point. Anyone else on this?
I would just like to make just one point, which is that for the regents whose terms have recently expired, right, no action can be taken to advance those nominations until the legislature is back in session, which doesn't occur until January. So you're consider you are continuing to serve, with all rights and privileges, that you were granted upon your confirmation. But in terms of process, that process can't move forward until the legislature is back in session, when they can then exercise their advice and consent on any nomination.
I appreciate that clarification. Ira and I both thought that we had another year on our terms. And Adam, you explained that to me at the meeting, at the last in-person board meeting. Could you explain again for our committee why that is the way it is?
Sure. I think that there was, an error in previous just listing of when regents' terms expired. I went back through the Connecticut General Assembly's database to cross-reference each regent's appointment with the resolution that was adopted by the Connecticut General Assembly. I also went back to CTN to watch the debates that took place during the confirmation. So the joint resolutions that were adopted by the Connecticut General Assembly list the expiration dates, and that those have the effect of law regarding terms and appointments for the regents. So in the matrix that was provided under the confirmation column, folks can click on any given appointment letter and navigate to the actual resolution that was adopted to see term in office.
Yeah. So Adam explained to me that I followed an earlier board member and her, say this again, Adam, my terms, please explain that
Sure.
again, because it's still.
Your predecessor, it appeared, served beyond, served a year beyond their term, right? Because you serve as a regent until a qualified successor is either voted on by the General Assembly or you're reappointed to that term. So they essentially took a year of or two of what would have been the next consecutive term. So because it keeps it on the sort of staggered schedule that was created when the board was adopted. Does that make sense? So if you have a 6-year
Not
term,
particularly. I mean,
and
there's a lot
let's say
of
you have a 6-year
correspondence
term
that shows our terms ending in 27.
I'm sorry?
There's a lot of correspondence that shows our terms ending in 27, not in 26. For Rick and me.
I don't know about the correspondence, but what I can tell you is what was passed by the Connecticut General Assembly is the law, is the term of appointment, and that's what we need to follow.
Yeah.
So let me put it this way: if your predecessor did their 6-year term and then served an additional year, right? Because they are able to serve as a regent until a successor is qualified, right? They have then taken that first year of the 6-year term, and therefore whoever follows serves 5 years.
That's what Adam explained to me as well. And Ira, I think we're both in the same boat. We're
Both in the same
now
boat, yeah.
serving. Yeah, we're now serving over the limit of the term we were officially appointed for, and whoever gets appointed to our positions, which I hope is you and me, our term began some time ago. So that's apparently the way this works for all of us. And that's why you and I show an expiration date of June 30th, 2026. Any other discussion on this? Because again, it's almost noontime. I didn't think this would go so long. I apologize for that. We're going to go into executive session. We're going to speak very briefly about potential names that I've collected from some of you and figure out together and with Adam's help and others how to get this thing going, how to move it. Okay? Everybody good? Is there anything else for the good of the order for our agenda today for the public meeting? Everybody all right? Okay, so before I call for a motion to move to executive session, let me state that the members of the Governance and Nominations Committee will move into executive session in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes 1-200 6E and 1-210B1 for discussion of preliminary notes and drafts related to appointments to the Board of Regents. No votes will be taken during the executive session. The committee will reconvene after the executive session solely for the purpose of adjourning this meeting. So other than committee members, the people who will be in attendance during the executive session are Jessica Paquette, Adam Joseph, Danny Anello, sorry, Danny Anello, and Felicia Brown, because they have information pertinent to or testimony related to the matters being discussed. Before we sign off from this meeting, Felicia, which link do we use for the executive meeting?
So in the email that I sent, you have a second link.
So we leave this
In the-
meeting and
and-
go to, and the email you sent was this morning or
No,
yesterday?
yesterday.
Okay, yesterday's email. We'll go to the second link to join the executive session. I don't think we'll be very long in the executive session. Then we'll come back to this, right?
Yes.
Okay, see you momentarily. Can I have a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Thanks. Second, anyone?
Second.
Ira, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. We'll move to the executive session and we'll be back shortly. Thank you.
I'm in.
Adam's in. Danny, Don.
Yes.
Is Felicia there?
I am. I sent Ben a note so he can take this down.
Okay, so I think we're all back in regular public session. I just want to state that during the executive session, we took no formal action. And we're back in regular session. And the only thing to do at this point is to adjourn our regular public meeting. Can I have a motion to do that, please?
So moved.
Second, anyone?
Sorry.
It's okay. No, that's, you're doing what you need to do. And this is over, basically. So,
I think
thank you.
So I'm gonna, am I allowed to second that motion just for the record?
Oh, I thought Regent Bloom was trying to,
Is that what just happened? All right, we have a motion to adjourn made by Don Williams, seconded by Ira Bloom. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Good. Thank you, everyone. This was a long meeting. I think we covered a lot of important issues. Appreciate your patience, and we'll follow up as discussed. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.